Good morning and welcome to our UK column viewers and listeners, wherever you are in the world. I'm delighted to say that we've got a fantastic day here in the south of England. We've got blue sky and we've got wall-to-wall sunshine, and that always makes a big difference. Today, I'm joined by a lady called Leah Summers. She's a Family Group Conference Co-ordinator. I had to look at my piece of paper to make sure I got that right. Leah is going to be telling us about her experiences working alongside social services and child protection issues. We had a conversation on the telephone and we covered some really interesting subjects. She's got some fantastic information which she wants to share. And I'm very excited about this because essentially this is yet another professional person who is starting to take the lid off some of the really terrible things that are going on within the social services system. So, Leah, welcome to UK Column, and thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking with me. It's wonderful.
It's a pleasure. Now, I've been putting out videos actually for a lot of years, talking about families that have had problems with social services. Some of those stories really very harrowing. Children have been taken from families under what the evidence seems to show is really false pretenses. We've sometimes had children that are taken away from a good parent and put in the custody of somebody who's been a poor parent or an abusive parent. And some of the stories that parents tell are very difficult for the average person to really believe, because many people think this just can't be happening, but it is happening.
It absolutely is. Yeah, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. Alongside those stories, the key thing I want to stress is that we do know that there are many people inside social services as an organisation who are unhappy with what's happening, and they are working for the good side. And UK Column has done two particularly valuable interviews with social services whistleblowers. One was a lady called Carol Woods, and that was about 8 years ago. Carol spoke out about a number of things, including what she regarded as the very poor treatment of babies and families with very young babies, newborn babies. And more recently, we did an interview with Emma Aaron, and her story particularly pertinent because trying to protect a young boy from abuse and doing all the right things as a professional social worker should, she eventually ended up being hounded by the police, and then even got to the stage where her own social services team turned up on her doorstep asking her questions about her own daughter. And clearly that was an attempt at intimidation. So before we get going, I just want to stress that whilst we've got a large number of parents coming forward with these stories about very bad things happening in social services, we've also got people inside the system who are clearly good people. And I'm going to say, Leah, I'd like to put you in that category because you said that you were very keen to speak out. So
Yes, I am.
set the scene. What's been happening and why have you come to the UK column?
Okay, so I was employed by Gloucestershire County Council in 2020 as a Family Group Conference Co-ordinator. At that point, I had been a foster carer with them since 2017. I thoroughly enjoyed the job. The role itself is a wonderful role, really, really valuable role. It brings in external family members to do a wraparound plan of support to support the child and their family with things that might be going a bit awry in their lives. And the aim is to keep the child out of the care system. So it's a very valuable role. In July of 2023, I was met with a very tricky situation. I had been working with a heavily pregnant mother, and the social worker, the children's social worker, had multiple red flags about her behaviour and the things that were going on. I was already working with the family when this social worker became involved. And to say she was like a bull in a china shop is, to put it mildly. She just came in and wanted to remove the baby at birth. I couldn't gauge the reasons as to why, what the concerns were. What was it that the social worker was concerned about? Why did she want to remove the child at birth? I never got that information, even though I escalated it to my management, and nothing was revealed to us. In the July, I received from the mother a TikTok video from the social worker's personal account, which was open to the public, and she was glorifying paedophilia. At that point, I was absolutely devastated. I was shocked. And when I went into the office to whistleblow, I was promptly told that I wasn't whistleblowing. I stressed that I wanted to whistleblow, but my manager said, no, you're not whistleblowing. It then kind of went into some sort of chaos, and I was sat down and spoken to about how I struggle with poor social work, how I can't fight the system from the inside, even though I had never at that point indicated that I'd wanted to. And I was told that I should walk away from my role.
Wow.
She also said to me that I should go and see her because she can help me to do that.
That is truly incredible in one way, but not surprising in another, because I've heard about this sort of approach before when people try and do the right things. Can we set the scene a little bit, Leah? Just explain how your role as a coordinator sits alongside social services and child protection. Can you do that for us?
We're meant to be independent from social services, but we sit in the children's services umbrella. So we're in the same bracket as Families First, children's social workers, child protection, the FGC service. We all sit under the same umbrella within children's services, employed by the local authority.
Right, okay. And are we allowed to say which of the local authorities this is?
Yeah, I've been trying to whistleblow for 18 months now, and I'm not quiet about it. So yeah, I worked for Gloucestershire County Council.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So you see an area of particular concern with a particular social worker.
Mm-hmm.
So was this an isolated incident that caused you to speak out, or was this one of a number of
It was
things?
one of a number. It's probably one of the worst, having had seen this TikTok video, and her whole presentation throughout, and her almost desperate need or want to remove this child. But in my whole time as a FGC coordinator, my manager was right. I did struggle with poor social work. I I saw a lot of things. Yes, I saw a lot of things. And I actually wanted to whistleblow about 12 months before, but I didn't have anything like that evidence that I needed to be able to present. Like, I could have expressed my views on a situation, whereas with this, I actually had some evidence where I could go in and actually whistleblow. But my intention has always been to publicly whistleblow, because I believe the public have a right to know what's going on within this service. And I also feel that children and families need a voice because they're not being heard.
Yes. And how long have you actually worked in that role?
3 years I was in the FGC service. I'm no longer in that service. I resigned in October of 2023 under constructive dismissal, and I started a tribunal process where I was going to take them to court for whistleblowing detriment and constructive dismissal.
So,
Previous to that, I was a foster carer for them. So I have actually worked with Gloucestershire County Council's Children's Services and Fostering Service since 2017.
right, that's extremely interesting, Leah, because obviously that gives you experience, if you like, both sides of the coin. So you've been fostering children that need fostering because they need to be living and looked after in a loving family location. So you've experienced that, and you've then also experienced social services dealing with families themselves. So, so you try and raise this issue, and if essentially they tell you you can't whistleblow, which is seems to me that's directly contrary to the whistleblowing law. But what do you do when they attempt to silence you?
Well, I was actually at that point, I was quite distressed. I was very upset. Um, the whole situation with the family, like for the couple of months that I'd been working with mum and working with this social worker, I had so many concerns. There was so much that was going on. Um, and I'd tried to raise it with my management multiple times, and I just kept being told that I was getting too involved, that I wasn't being impartial, that the mum has clearly learned that she can trust you, which is why she's always ringing you. And at that point, I did feel like I was the only protective professional in that mother's life, and I was deeply concerned about why the social worker wanted to remove the baby in the manner that she did, especially as we were involved and looking at ways in which the mother could be supported to keep the child at home. So I became very, very upset, and I kind of think I went into a little bit of shock. Like, I did anticipate when I got the video that I know how whistleblowers are treated. It's quite widely known, isn't it? How whistleblowers can be treated. So I highly anticipated that it wasn't going to be a positive experience. And the
Leah,
following day, I went off sick.
Leah, you said something very significant there for me, which is that they said to you more or less the problem is that the mother trusts you and therefore she's phoning you. But surely for the average person, you would expect social workers who were doing a good job. I know you were not working directly in a social worker role, but we use that expression. You would expect families to trust the professionals that have come alongside to help support them. So I find that a very revealing statement that you should be chastised for actually demonstrating that you have the ability to win the trust of a family, because you would need that trust to work with them properly.
Absolutely, absolutely. With the person that said those things to me, I I feel that there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of fear in my team, a lot of fear in my team. Um, and I think because I had been quite vocal in the past when I was working with what I believe to be an incompetent or corrupt social worker, I would be quite vocal about it in the office, because I do believe that families need a voice and it needs to come from people like myself. Whilst we're in the system, we need to challenge the system where we see the failings, rather than ignore them. But there was definitely a lot of fear in my team. So I don't want that specific person to feel targeted by what I'm saying, um, because I kind of understand the fear.
Yes, and that again is a very significant point that you have. If we take it as a sort of black and white position, we have people that have engaged in a professional career in order to do some really special work, which is to work alongside families that have got problems that need help, and and yet those professionals are operating in an environment of fear. That's a pretty amazing statement. And you're saying that, and I've heard this from, I'm going to say all other areas of the country, that within the system, there is not a a relaxed, friendly, professional atmosphere to the provision of these services. It's very, very tightly controlled. And one of the things that I've really paid attention to with mums, sometimes dads that I'm talking to, is that they say to me that if they were having problems in their particular circumstances and dealing with social services, if a social worker appeared who started to do the right things, was nice to them, did build up trust and a rapport, and started to argue the family's case in an appropriate way. This is not mum and dad over and above the children. This is trying to work with the parents and the children as a unit. Those individuals were removed from the case. They were taken off the case.
Absolutely. I've seen it, I've experienced it. With the case in question, I experienced that. You will find families have multiple social workers within a very short space of time. And the mother that I was working with in this situation, she had 3 social workers within the space of about a month. The second social worker that came in was wanting to give this mother a chance. I had a telephone conversation with her, and she said to me, her words were, "Do you see in this mum what they all say about her? Because I don't, and I want to give her a chance." And I agreed with her. I said, "No, I don't see what they're saying about her. In fact, I find her to be very pleasant to work with. Let's do this family group conference. It will be really beneficial for her." Within a matter of days, the social worker had left, and we had the new social worker who came in like a bull in a china shop. I didn't witness this myself, but the mother rang me and said that the social worker had arrived with the new social worker and had just said, "This is your new social worker. I can't do this anymore."
Leah, the other thing that's put across to me very strongly by parents is that it's a feeling that once they've got involved with a social services team, it's like they're locked into a system from which there's no escape.
Can be like that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of them would be thinking, okay, we've got problems and we recognise that, but we are trying to work with the social services team. They quickly find that they can do nothing right.
Absolutely. I've experienced that as well. I have a plethora of stories that I could share, and it would take us multiple interviews. But everything you say, yeah, I've seen it all.
Okay, I'll keep putting some of these points to you because I am not the professional. I'm
Yeah,
somebody who came in and started to learn this by families contacting me and telling me information and sharing a lot of court documents with me.
professional. I'd like to confirm that it absolutely does happen. This is exactly how it is.
So do you believe, Leah, that social services are in some places they are doing their job, and we recognize that, and there are children that need to be taken away from their families and placed in a better environment. But the message which is coming to me day after day, and in the last 24 hours, I've taken another 2 calls, is that children are being targeted. There's a focus on particular children. Social services get involved with the family, and then they create their own evidence, risk of future emotional harm, in order to take those children away from the parents. Is that a story, or do you think this is what is actually taking place?
It's actually happening. Absolutely. In Gloucester, I have on this journey, um, I have come across even more stories from members of the public, not ones that I've worked with, and it is incredible how many children are being removed unnecessarily, and how many children who actually really could do with that provision are being left at home.
We've got we'll say a developing track record that social services child protection teams are actually doing the exact opposite
Mm,
of what everybody believes they're there for and what
they
they
are.
should be doing. They do the opposite.
Yeah, they are. They are. There are some good social workers. I don't want to sit here and say every single social worker is awful. I've worked with some good ones, but they are very far and few between. And they are up against a system that I believe is broken by design.
Okay, that's a very important point, and I, from the outside looking in, I would absolutely agree with you. This is the case that the system has been deliberately broken and deliberately refocused so that it's not a supportive system. It's actually a system which is targeting families. Yesterday, I spent quite a lot of the day editing. It was to produce a relatively short video clip of about 6 minutes. I had about 30 minutes of material to work with. And what was that material? That was phone video, which a mother had taken of children being taken away. Well, a grandmother had taken of young children being taken away from her daughter. So in a room, there were social workers, there were, at the end of the day, about 7 police. And I found editing that clip so difficult that at one point I had to take myself away and go and get a cup of coffee. It was appalling. And one of the reasons it was so emotional was that I knew the depth of the story, which was that those children who'd been with a perfectly loving mother and grandmother were taken away by the police and social services. This happened up in Scotland, and they were moved down into the Midlands, where they were given to the estranged and abusive father. So the children were taken away from the loving home and they were given to a home where, at best, you could say the children were not going to have a pleasant environment due to the previous actions of the actual birth father. That is the sort of material that is being presented to me, and that is the material where you start to question, what are social services actually doing? Are they helping the families, or are they doing something else?
They're doing something else. They're absolutely doing something else. I have other stories. I have other parents that have contacted me with very, very similar circumstances. This isn't just a small problem. This is a systemic problem that is up and down the country. We have to question their motives. Why are they doing this?
Initially, if I respond to that one, Leah, initially, I believed the incentive was money, on the basis that once a local authority had engaged with the family, and particularly if they could actually take the child away from the family, huge amounts of money started to change hands because this is a very crude calculation, but nevertheless, it focuses mind. So if you look at the number of professionals who get involved with a family court case, so of course you've got the judge and all the legal team being paid, but then you also have usually a psychiatrist or a psychologist involved. You have CAFCAS. You can have other particular professionals. If you add up all of their professional fees, the rough cost or the rough amount of money that circulates for a child protection court case is about £250,000. And then if you say, well, at the moment, I believe that there's about 75,000 looked after children If you get your calculator out and you multiply 75,000 by a quarter of a million, you are into a multi-billion pound industry before anything else has happened. Um, and for example, children with special needs and particularly serious special needs, their placement costs can run into multiple £1,000s a week. These are huge amounts of money, but I used to think it was the money. But as time went on and you saw this business, that what they were doing seemed to be 180 degrees out with what they should be doing. Instead of supporting families to keep the family together, they seemed to work to break the families up. I began to feel that an agenda coming to the surface, not everybody involved in it, but coming to the surface, is that their intent was to break the families up.
Yeah. I do think it is about money. There's no two ways about that. It is about money, but I do believe they are gaining something by causing people harm other than just money. There is something more nefarious going on. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. You mentioned two things to be in the telephone call. One was you used the expression brutal, which I quickly picked up on because you described seeing actions, not by all social workers, but by some, as being utterly brutal.
Yeah.
And you also described some of the social worker professionals whose behavior was, I'll say, cold and detached. And you would notice this. Tell us a little bit more about that.
They just lack empathy. They've got no empathy. I would have social workers laughing at me about circumstances going on within families. I worked with one mother in particular. I can't say too much. I don't have consent to share her story, but the social workers were so down on her. They just didn't have any faith in her, and I did. I knew that she could achieve what she needed to achieve, and she did. She was amazing. She worked so hard. She did every single thing social care asked of her. And then I would be on the phone, and they'd be like, she's not going to do this. She's not going to cope. She's not going to manage this. It was awful. It was almost like this gossip culture of how they can sit around and run families down, like talk badly about them. Like we don't have no faith. They're not going to do it. Look at their history, and that's another thing. They pick and choose. Like they'll look at one family. They'll be like, we need to consider the history, and then there'll be like another family, and you will try to identify something that's crucial within their history, and they'll go, no, 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 we can't use that. That's historical. So they pick and choose how they do things. Sometimes it's in their benefit. If it's in their benefit, they'll use it. If it's not, they're like, no, no, that's no good.
Thank you for that. I've also had people telling me, I'll call them strange stories, but they're stories to do with about the training of the social workers themselves. And one particular one, which I've never forgotten, this was from a mother, lives down in the south of England, but her daughter had signed on to a social services degree course, as far as I remember. And one weekend, the girl had come home from university and she'd been studying in the dining room and lots of papers and books, and she was working hard. Then she decided to go out, and her mother saw on the table books with what she described as appalling sexual material, and she found it really disturbing and didn't quite understand what was going on. So when the daughter came back, she said to the daughter, I sort of saw these images on those books of yours on the table, and what's that about? And the girl said, oh, we have to look at that material in order to understand the people we're dealing with. And the mother was incredibly distressed. But what came into my head was that actually her daughter was being groomed effectively in the course to desensitize her to material which actually she should have been naturally abhorrent at.
Yeah.
And um, and then somebody else told me about somebody going on a course, and actually the first words of the professor was, "You will be destroying people's lives." And you say, okay, those are two anecdotal stories, but I know the people that produce that information. And you ask the question, so what is actually going on in the course itself? Are good people being put through a training process which is actually reframing the way they think so that ultimately they become cold?
Yes, I believe so. I believe so. I think it also takes a certain type of person. I think narcissism is rife in social care. These people don't care. I have questioned so many times, like, how can they behave like this and then go home as if nothing has happened during their day and go to sleep at night? Like, I can't understand how. So I feel like, yes, these people are being indoctrinated into certain ways of being, but I also believe that there has to come from the person themselves as well, because there's no way I could do that. But that's what you see. You see good social workers leave. They can't do it. I've heard of many social workers that have left Gloucester County Council because they don't like the way in which they work. And it isn't, there are social workers that are bullied horrifically. So yeah, I think it takes a certain type of person actually that goes in with the aim of gaining power and control over these people.
And we could reinforce that by we'll say making the suggestion that people who have got incorrect or inappropriate ideas about what they want around families and children go in to a system where actually they're able to ply their trade.
Mm, hmm. I suppose it's easy access for abusers to, yeah, work with vulnerable people.
Yes. One of the other things that I've found particularly disturbing, which a lot of people don't know, is, and you correct me here if I'm not correct in respect of certainly Gloucestershire Council, but essentially social services departments within the local authority act as a law unto themselves. So not even elected members in the council, even if a member has a specific allocated responsibility for child protection, not even those elected members can get access to the family court cases that their own social work teams are dealing with. So what I'm saying is that it's like a closed door and there's no independent access and assessment of what these teams are doing.
That wouldn't surprise me. I can't speak about Gloucestershire County Council's actual councillors. I don't know, but that wouldn't surprise me at all.
So you've blown the whistle.
Mm.
Where do you stand now with relations with the council? Have you been completely ostracized? Are you clear of it?
I am clear of it now, which is why I'm able to approach the press and really start whistleblowing publicly. It's been a long journey. Um, when that happened in July, I instantly knew that I'd lost my job. I knew I was no longer safe in my role. I didn't trust my management team anymore. So the following day, I called the doctor and I explained everything to them. And they agreed to give me a sick note for 2 months with stress at work. They detailed everything that I'd said on my records. So everything about the whistleblowing is now on my medical records as well. Um, and I went off sick for 2 months. I did it initially. I asked for a little bit of a break just to. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was actually really quite anxious. Um, So I asked for a little bit of space, but I wasn't really granted that. I was put under undue pressure to have an occupational health appointment. Initially, I didn't want the appointment. They're not worth that. They're not that good. Even my manager at the time would say to you, occupational health appointments are worthless. But I'd spoken with the solicitor at this point, and they had suggested that I go ahead with the appointment so that I could get my say on record. So I did agree. My manager then wrote the referral and sent it to me to have a look at before the referral was actually sent in. And I was horrified with what I was reading. Absolutely horrified. They'd pretty much neglected the actual circumstances of what had happened on that day, minimized it, barely spoke about it. And they went right back to the moment that I was first employed. And there was so much stuff in there that I'm like, I don't even know what they're talking about here. Like, she would say, I was concerned at this situation with this family when Leah presented in this manner. I just could not believe what I was reading. And right at the end, she basically indicated that I was a safeguarding risk to children.
So, without any names, who compiled that report? A line manager, effectively.
My manager, yeah.
And what you are describing is what was obviously a very carefully constructed report, which was designed to undermine your professional
Absolutely.
performance with the council.
It was proof to me. Like when I said I knew that I'd already lost my job, once I received that, I knew it was confirmation. I have lost my job. They are going to force me out. I am now a problem because I have highlighted an issue with a social worker. Um, she actually rang me up to go through the referral. We didn't actually speak a lot about it. She refused to talk about it on the phone. She wanted to see me in person. That was the only way she was willing to go through the document with me. And I said to her, I don't want to see you. We can talk about this over the phone. I said that I was horrified. We started to talk about the stuff that had happened. She denied it. And then she put the phone down on me, saying she was going to escalate it to HR. I again was very, very anxious, thinking, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen next?" I actually contacted HR myself, who were useless. HR are only there to protect the county council's policies and procedures, their reputation. That is the only reason they're there. They are not there for the employee. They were useless. I was directed to my service manager. I went and I approached my service manager via email. And from that moment on, at that point, we're in early August of 2023. And from that moment on, for 3 months, I battled them internally. I decided that initially I was going to go ahead with a grievance, but my former manager has had multiple grievances against her, and she always wins. And I've seen her behavior. She isn't a pleasant manager. She's very passive aggressive. She talks about, I need to take care of your well-being. She knows what to say. Like, I need to take care of your well-being, but underlying, she's really passive aggressive. And she had bullied multiple members of my team. I'd seen it. I'd seen their high levels of anxiety within the team, high levels of sickness within the team. So I knew that a grievance was fruitless. So I decided to not do that, and I just started to make a stand. I said that I wanted to find a resolution that would suit us all, and I was very open with them. I told them I still intend to whistleblow. I want to whistleblow, but I want to whistleblow publicly. Will you support me to do that? Everything that I tried was ignored. It was blanked. I was highlighting the failures within the service. I was giving case studies with families' permission. I was trying to promote positive change. How can we promote positive change for staff and families? It was met on deaf ears. I was blanked. I was getting responses, but they weren't. I still have all the emails. They were robotic responses. They were not answering my questions. They were not confirming or denying whether they were going to support me to whistleblow. They were just blanking it entirely. When I'm sending them in examples of the failings and the things that are happening within families, it was being blanked and ignored. In the end, I was allowed to send a 4-page letter to the Director of Children's Services, which I did. I sent her a very lengthy letter. It was ignored. It was completely ignored. I had warned them in a positive manner that I was going to take them to court, but that I didn't want to take them to court, that I wanted to find a resolution, that I want to protect people. I don't want this to explode, but I will take it to court if we don't find this resolution. We didn't find a resolution. So on the 9th of October, I resigned under constructive dismissal and I started the tribunal process. That was a complete and utter shambles. It's been 18 months of hell, but I'm stronger than I've ever been. They completely underestimated me. The process is over, and I'm now ready to speak my truth in every avenue that I can in order to raise awareness for children and families.
Leah, thank you very much for sharing that with us, because what you've said and what you've been doing is utterly fantastic.
Thank you.
I run a series which is called Gutsy Women, and I have a dilemma these days because I'm really pleased to say there's a lot of gutsy women out there.
Oh, it's good to hear.
When you talk about what started to happen when you challenged the system, I've heard this before, and not necessarily in relation even to children's services, but when people within local authorities discover wrongdoing, could be corruption, for example, misappropriation of money, and they come forward to do the right things, they are utterly smashed. They are stalled, they're accused, they're character assassinated, and the ultimate agenda, particularly with we need to look after your well-being, is often the start of false accusations that the person's suffering from depression or has got mental health problems. Because
That is exactly what I faced. It's
yes,
exactly what I faced.
they
I'm
like
mentally unwell. I'm a liar. I'm dishonest. They attacked my spirituality, trying to make out like I'm crazy. Yeah,
yes, because if they can get that label on you, and they can get any reference to that type of label in your personal professional documents, they're well on the way to absolutely discrediting you as a witness.
that was exactly what they intended to do.
Yeah.
Mm.
What is so fantastic here is that I got to encourage our viewers and listeners to actually think, okay, we're based in UK, but this principle applies in most other, certainly Western countries, that the rule is that child protection is one of the most fundamental issues. Governments talk about it, so our respective governments, whether it's been Labour or Conservative, doesn't matter who the Prime Minister has been, it all comes down to we are concerned at child protection, and protecting children is everybody's responsibility.
Absolutely.
Every, I'll add, every child matters, because that was one of their little phrases. And
Yeah,
yet you are yet another example that when a professional sees, experiences, and has the evidence to demonstrate that children are not being protected, and you stand up to speak out and expose what's going on, you are brutalized. I use that word deliberately in order to shut you up. So public are told you must be doing everything possible to protect children, but when the state and its agencies, such as local authorities, are exposed as failing to protect children, They don't welcome the positive suggestions, which is where you started in trying to deal with them. They don't want that. They just want to silence you as a whistleblower as fast as possible.
They reward the abusers and they punish people like me. I feel like I've been punished. I lost my job. I nearly lost my home and my car. I considered whether I'd have to rehome my pet. It did impact my mental health to a degree. Like, I did experience anxiety. I was incredibly stressed. I nearly lost my home. Like, I was incredibly stressed. It didn't impact my mental health in the way that they were talking about me. But my manager was moved into another role. She had a secondment at £80,000 a year. The social worker in question wasn't even suspended for gross misconduct. She continued within her role. And I've recently found out she's been made a manager. She's been promoted. So, from my perspective, they've got it all upside down, all the wrong way round. They would rather protect those people and crucify somebody like me.
Right.
Whistleblowing policies are not worth the paper that they're written on.
And we have another key question here because if it's working the wrong way round, this is either failure. It's such a dramatic failure through the system that they're getting it so badly wrong that they're actually producing the opposite effect to what their declared professional role is. It's either incompetence on an unbelievable scale, or you have experienced a deliberate policy to deliver the opposite service to what they say they're there for.
I believe it's deliberate. I really do. There's too much. There's too much of it. There's too much that I've seen. There's too much I've experienced. And like I said, during this process, I kind of have become a magnet for families and I just started hearing all these other stories, and then I started to actually reach out to people. I'm looking at helping families in Gloucester to share their stories. It's something I'm working on at the moment, and there will be more that comes from that moving forward. But I've been reaching out to people, and the stories just don't stop coming. They just don't stop coming.
Which is exactly what I experience. I'm going to say I'm very encouraged. I'm actually very excited this year because not only are more and more families coming forward and speaking out, and that takes a lot of courage from families that have been suppressed within this pretty unpleasant system. Not only are we getting more families speaking out, but the quality of the information that's coming out of them is extremely high. And in many cases, families have been through this sort of brutal procedure. Children have been falsely taken away from parents. But the parents, in dealing with the sheer stress and trauma of that, do not have the additional capability to suddenly appear on a public stage and talk about what's happening. So many of them fail, and nobody would criticize them for that. It's the pressure
Absolutely
they're
not.
under.
Mhm.
But we are seeing more and more parents, mums and dads, particularly mums, who are stepping up to speak out, and they are doing it in an immensely professional way. So
Yeah.
they are coping with clear anger that is there under the surface, but they're dealing with facts and they're talking about documents and they're putting real evidence across to illustrate what's happening to them. And I think that this is very, very exciting and important because,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, the number of people we get speaking out, I've likened this to a bank robbery. If a bank robbery takes place, the bank robbers in general do not get convicted because somebody's produced 2,000 pages of documentary evidence. The evidence that is likely to convict them can be very simple, that two people were on the street and saw two particular men get out of a car with guns and go into the bank. So it's the testimony of the witness and the accuracy of those testimonies which convict in court. And if we have one or two parents coming forward with stories about brutalization within child protection, okay, that's one or two. But if we have 10, if we have 20, if we have 100, if we have 1,000 parents coming forward from different parts of the country and essentially telling the same story, that testimony, group testimony, for me is overwhelming. It must stand on its own.
Absolutely. I think we need to be prepared. It's going to be in its hundreds of thousands of families up
Leah,
and down the country.
do you actually know how many children are taken away from parents in Gloucestershire every year? Do you know?
No, no. I have actually been considering doing some research on this and doing a freedom of information request to directly to the council. I have a few figures that I want to know, but I haven't done that just yet because I don't want to poke the beast at the moment. They haven't gagged me. And I just want to start sharing my story as much as I can before I start doing anything else, which I will. I do intend to at some point. But I thought I just want to start speaking my truth. But I
That,
am going to find out those figures. It is in my mind. This is something I absolutely want to do. Yeah.
yes,
There are some other figures I want to know as well.
I can tell you there are other people at the moment in the country who are also moving down this path, and I can't name them because that's not fair, but they're doing some really good work in the background. Um, you've spoken out, people have come forward, both families and people within social services. Have you spoken to other individuals to try and get help? For example, have you talked to the mainstream media or your local MP or any people like that?
I haven't bothered with my local MP, no, because I don't trust the politicians, unfortunately. So no, I haven't approached my local MP. I have thought about it, and if he approached me, I would be willing to have a conversation with him. But I haven't deliberately gone out to him. I have only just started reaching out to the press, and yes, I am. I want to get this into mainstream. I do have another interview lined up, but we're going to work at it a little bit slower. I'm going to be with the mother who I was working with when I received the TikTok video. We're going to speak out together. And it's going to be very, very targeted around the whistleblowing, the social worker in question, and what happened for the mother from her perspective, working with the social worker, and then from my perspective, working with the social worker, building up to me whistleblowing and what happened thereafter. I'm waiting to hear from others. I have contacted some mainstream, and yeah, I'm waiting to see if they respond. Let's hope they do. I'm going to keep pushing it. I'm hoping that the more movement I have, especially with the next one, because it's localized, but it's more mainstream. So I'm hoping that this one is going to really push it out into the mainstream. Yeah.
Right. Well, this is very good because something else that we would say is that we know that even within mainstream media, there are good people, and
Yeah.
there are people that look out the window and know something is wrong. I can tell you for a fact that I've dealt with people both in the bigger newspapers, but also even within TV channels who have done the groundwork on stories to do with child protection. They were clearly very moved and motivated by their interaction with the parents who'd suffered what was clear wrongdoing, if not criminal activity. but then those stories were suppressed by the editorial teams. I know this has happened for a fact, and on a number of occasions, the journalists themselves were clearly devastated that what they regarded as a critical story in the public interest was actually closed down by their own
By the
editorial
editor,
teams.
yeah, that doesn't
And
surprise me.
yeah, but nevertheless, I totally agree with you that child protection is such an issue that we need to try every single avenue to get the story out. So I hope that that goes well for
And
you.
my next interview, like I said, it's much more mainstream. It is. I don't want to sort of speak too much about it really because, yeah, I just want to proceed with it for until we, because again, it might end up, no, we can't run it. Like I'm half anticipating that happening. So that's why I don't want to speak too much about it, but it is much more mainstream. So
Well, you
just
go and do that, and
yeah,
I hope it,
let's hope it goes.
I
It's
hope
going
it's
very well so far. So yeah,
yeah. So you've got a platform with us at the moment, and the people are listening in, and I know people are going to be listening very closely and watching very closely what you say. To parents out there who've experienced some of this appalling treatment by their so-called care teams, what would you encourage those parents to do?
speak your truth. Be brave. Find the avenues. Speak to people like myself, yourself. I'm currently on TikTok, um, and I am going to be doing this where I'm going to support people to share their story. Um, Seek as much advice as you can get from people like yourself, but hang in there because there are people like myself who really are fighting hard for them.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you for that. And you can also speak to our audience itself. What would you like to see the UK column audience doing for you? I always have a simple thing for them to do, which I'll add, but what would you like to feel that the audience you have today is going to do in order to help you?
I would like them to share my story. I would like them to start questioning what is going on within our social care services. It doesn't matter, anybody that has a child in their life is vulnerable to social care. It doesn't matter how wealthy you are. It doesn't matter how much of a good parent you are. All it'll take is for your child to end up with a bruise or something like that for social services to become involved and say that you are the ones to blame for that. I would ask that some really honest conversations start happening, start questioning what is going on, and don't look at these families as if they are somehow responsible for having social care in their lives. Because there's a lot of stigma attached to families. I hear it a lot. Oh, their social care don't get involved for no reason. Well, actually, as a professional, I can tell you they do. Um, so yeah, that would that be a bit more open minded, question everything, and share my story as much as you can to raise awareness.
Yeah, thank you, Leah. Well, that sharing of the information was the key one for me because it's such an easy thing for people to do. I'll just add that the other thing that comes with the sharing of information is people often say, "Oh, well, I sent the video to my sister or I sent the video to a friend," and they simply didn't believe it. They said this can't be true. And so what I say to the people who were sending the material out is just don't be put out off by this. It's like planting seeds in the garden. Some of them some of them take and grow and some won't. But if you get put down, don't be disheartened. Just keep pushing the information out.
Keep going.
Yes. And the other one, I'm smiling as I say it, but actually it's a very powerful tool, and it's amazing what you can achieve by talking about difficult subjects in a Tesco queue,
Mm,
self in line for the
yeah.
Don't use one of the do-it-yourself price paying systems, because that's going to put people out of jobs. But if you're in the queue, you just start talking about it, and you'll be amazed at the reaction of people around you. I've done this on a number of topics on many occasions, and I have often experienced that once I get out of the doors, out of the store, somebody comes running after me and says, "Can I talk to you about what you were talking about in the queue?"
Oh, really?
Oh yes,
Oh,
yeah.
that's wonderful.
It's very, very interesting. So, and the other bit is that if people are pushing information out about what this is a very sensitive subject. We're talking about family and children being taken away from people. There's a lot of trauma. You must stay calm and measured in the way that you disseminate information and the way you deal with people. The calmer and more reasonable we all are, the better people take up that information.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. I think I had one last question, and it's now slipped out of my head, which is a shame because I shall remember it in a minute. But Leah, I want to say to you a huge thank you, because I know from some experience I've had myself from other people how much courage it takes to first of all take on your employer, particularly when they're local authorities, because they can be brutal in the way they deal with you. So you've demonstrated a lot of courage, and it's wonderful that you are already able to say that families are coming forward to trust you to speak out. So that's brilliant. And I really hope that you'll speak to us again,
Oh,
you know,
absolutely. Yeah,
to
I will.
tell us a bit more about what you've achieved.
Yeah, I will, definitely. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you, Leah.